ChatGPT said. Late on a quiet night, Samir sat in his yellow taxi and watched the empty streets slip by under the soft glow of streetlights. He had driven this route 1,000 times before, but something about the air felt different tonight. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of rain, even though the sky was clear. The city seemed to hold its breath as if it were waiting for something to happen. Samir adjusted the rearview mirror and glanced at his own tired eyes. He had picked up this midnight shift to earn a little extra money, but he also liked the calm that came with driving when most people were asleep. He flexed his fingers around the steering wheel, feeling the familiar grooves worn smooth by years of late-night driving. He thought of his wife, Aisha, and their 2 children, sleeping soundly at home. He smiled at the memory of his daughter's laughter earlier that evening when she had climbed into the cab after school and told him about her drawing class. His son had been shy, hiding behind his mother's legs, but eventually waved good. Bye. Those smiles were why he kept working long hours. Every night he drove, he reminded himself that he was providing for his family's future. Just as he was about to doze off behind the wheel, his radio crackled to life. Cab 47 pickup. At 12 Maple Lane, the dispatcher's voice said, cold and distant over the speaker. Samir sat up straight. He checked his meter, then tapped the button to signal he was accepting the call. Maple Lane was near the edge of town, past the last cluster of apartment blocks and into the quieter, older streets. He flipped on his turn, signal, and steered away from the main road, leaving the bright neon signs and late-night shops behind. As he drove, Samir noticed how the streetlights thinned out until only a few dim lamps illuminated cracked sidewalks. Old trees leaned over the road, their branches reaching for each other across the asphalt. The city's noise faded, replaced by the soft hum of his tires and the occasional chirp of a nightbird. He slowed down when he reached a row of shuttered shops. At 12 Maple Lane, a tall iron gate blocked the driveway of a large mansion. The gate looked old, but sturdy, with iron roses curling around the bars. Samir parked under a flickering lamp and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy, as if the night itself was watching. He waited, tapping his fingers lightly on the steering wheel. His headlights illuminated the driveway, showing smooth cobblestones and neatly trimmed hedges on either side. A low hedge ran along the perimeter, beyond which he could just make out the mansion's stone walls. After a moment, a figure appeared beyond the gate. It was a woman dressed in dark clothes. She moved slowly, almost as if she did not trust the shadows. Samir unlocked his door and stepped out. The cool air brushed against his face, making him pull his jacket tighter. He walked to the gate and pressed the intercom button. A small speaker crackled, and he said, "Taxi here, ma'am." The woman looked up but did not answer. She pressed a button on the gate, and it swung open with a quiet thud. Samir watched her approach, her footsteps soft on the cobblestones. When she reached the taxi, she climbed in without a word. Samir hurried back to his seat and closed the door gently. He checked the rearview mirror and saw her face for the first time. Her dark hair fell over her cheeks, wet with tears. Eyes were red and swollen, and her shoulders shook as if she might collapse. He cleared his throat softly. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked in a gentle voice, careful not to scare her. She looked up, startled, as though she had forgotten he was there. She swallowed hard and whispered a distant-sounding address, the Green Valley Road. "Please." Her voice trembled, and Samir felt a knot tighten in his chest. He nodded and put the car in gear, pulling smoothly back onto Maple Lane. He drove slowly, giving her a moment to settle. The woman did not speak again, Samir noticed, her hands resting on her lap, clutching a small black purse. He could see the faint glimmer of a diamond ring on her finger and a gold bracelet around her wrist. Her clothes looked expensive, too dark silk that had once been smooth and new, now wrinkled from tears. Realized she must be someone important. Perhaps a wealthy widow, chasing safety in the night. Samir focused on the road, but his mind raced with questions. Why was she crying at such a late hour? What had happened at that mansion? He glanced at her in the mirror, feeling a surge of concern. He wanted to ask if she was all right, but he did not want to push her. Instead, he kept his eyes forward, and his voice calm, It's a long drive, he said quietly. You want me to turn on the heater? She gave a small shake of her head. No, thank you. Her voice was barely louder than the rustle of the air. Samir nodded and kept driving. Streetlights ended, and they entered a stretch of country road lined by tall grass. Shadows danced across the windshield as he passed under trees. The moon shone brightly, painting the road in silver. He thought of his own family sleeping at home, safe behind locked doors. He wondered who would be waiting for her, if anyone. He slowed down at a crossroads where a lone cafe flickered with light. A single neon sign buzzed above the door. He thought about suggesting they stop for tea, but he remembered how upset she looked. She needed to reach her destination fast. He sped up again, careful not to break the gentle peace of the night. Inside the taxi, the radio played soft music at low volume, old songs from a simpler time. He tapped his fingers to the beat, then cleared his throat. If you need to talk, he said, I'm here. He smiled kindly, though he could see. Her pain had roots too deep for words. She stared out the window, but her reflection in the glass showed tear tracks shining in the moonlight. The road curved, climbing a small hill, and Samir's headlights revealed a cluster of houses on the other side. He recognized the stretch. Green Valley Road came next. He took a deep breath, wondering what awaited at the end. He imagined a small cottage, lights off, maybe a friend's home, or a safe place. Or maybe nothing but darkness, the kind that made her cry in the first place. He checked the meter, and then his watch. It was nearly 1 a.m. The streets were empty of cars and people. Only the night creatures moved in the shadows, hidden from view. He thought of the mansion behind them and the secrets it held. Pressed the pedal gently, keeping the ride smooth. He wanted to be someone she could trust, someone steady in her storm. Slowly, the street signs changed from numbers to names. He saw a small sign that read Green Valley Road, pointing down a narrow lane. At the turn, a row of oak trees arched over the pavement like guardians. He followed the curve and pulled up in front of an old stone house with frosted windows. A single light glowed faintly inside, casting a sad warmth on the porch. Samir parked and cut the engine. The silence returned, thick and heavy. He turned to her and saw her shoulders trembling again. He reached for his wallet and offered her a soft smile. We're here, he said. She looked at him, eyes wide as if she had only just felt safe enough to believe it. She opened the door and hesitated. Samir reached out and gently closed the passenger door for her. Then he leaned over and asked, Will you be all right now? Her lips shook, and she nodded slowly. He felt an urge to stay, to wait until someone came for her, but he knew that was not his job. He had done all he could. He gave a quiet nod and said, Take care, ma'am. She stepped onto the porch and turned back. In her hand she held his gaze for a heartbeat, then she whispered, Thank you, and disappeared inside. Samir sat for a moment, looking at the dim light behind the curtains. He thought of the tears on her face and the sound of her whisper. Then he leaned back, started the engine, and drove off into the night, the rain-scented breeze following him down the silent road. Samir eased the taxi forward, watching the woman settle into the back seat. Her shoulders trembled, as though the cold night air had crept into her bones and refused to leave. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw her hands clutching the edge of the seat. Her knuckles were white, and she wore a diamond ring that caught the dim glow of the overhead lamp. A thin scarf lay across her lap, its soft fabric bunched in her grip. He wondered how many tears it had already soaked up. He cleared his throat, careful not to startle her. The engine's hum filled the space between them. Outside, the streetlights blinked over empty sidewalks. Samir felt the weight of her silence, like a stone in his chest. He wanted to help, but he did not know how. He placed his hands on the wheel and spoke softly. Where to, ma'am? His voice felt small in the quiet car. She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were ringed with red and dark curls clung to her damp cheeks. For a moment, she stared past him as if she did not know he was there. Then, with a voice that cracked like thin ice, she whispered, Please, just drive. The words were so light he almost missed them. Samir nodded and shifted his seatbelt, careful to make no sudden moves. He watched the meter click over as he turned. Onto the main road, headlights cut through the darkness, revealing old brick buildings and shuttered shops. The taxi's interior light cast a soft glow, enough to show him her trembling form, but not enough to draw too much attention. He felt as though he and this grieving stranger formed a small cocoon of safety in the night. He glanced at her hands again. The bracelet on her wrist was gold and thick, the kind of piece someone with means would choose. Her coat was dark wool, expensive and tailored. He thought of the stories he had heard on his long drive, stories of people who never expected trouble, but found it anyway. He felt a gentle responsibility settle over him. This woman needed more than just a ride. She needed someone who cared. Cleared his throat again, softer this time. If you feel ready, you can tell me where you want to go? His words came slowly, like he was easing open a door. She took a deep breath, as though gathering courage, but her eyes did not move to meet his in the mirror. Finally, she spoke. I need to get to 45 Elm Street, the house by the old oak tree. Her voice was steady now but quiet. Samir made the turn onto Elm Street. Tall trees lined the road, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, painting the hood of the taxi in pale lines. He noticed her eyes flicker as she watched the trees. Pass by? You mind if I turn off the music? She asked softly. She sounded shy, almost embarrassed. He nodded and pressed the button. The car fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the engine. Outside, the world felt still. He gave her a few moments to herself, kept both hands on the wheel, steering carefully over the cracked asphalt. His mind raced with questions, but he held them back. She would share when she was ready. After a few minutes, she reached into her purse and brought out a tissue. She wiped her cheeks and took a small steadying breath. Then she glanced at him in the mirror, her eyes meeting his at last. Thank you, she said, her voice small. But clear. I'm sorry if I seem strange. It's been a terrible night. Samir shook his head gently. No need to apologize. You're safe here. Wherever you want to go, I'll get you there. His tone was warm, and he offered a small smile in the mirror. She did not smile back, but he could see relief soften her features. She swallowed and tried to steady her voice. I'm Madeline, she said. Madeline Harper. The name hung between them like a secret. Harper Samir had heard it before, on the news. The Harpers were one of the richest families in the city. Their charitable dinners, their grand mansion by the lake. He realized then why the address on his call sheet had seemed so familiar. He felt a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by concern. If she was really the Harper widow, she must be in real danger. He swallowed, careful not to sound too eager. Nice to meet you, Madeline. I'm Samir. He spoke slowly, emphasizing his name so she could feel he was a real person, not just another stranger in a cab. She nodded and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her hands relaxed slightly in her lap. They drove on in silence for a while, the streets growing narrower and quieter. The city lights gave way to shaded lawns and low brick walls. The taxi passed a row of neat houses, all dark inside except for the occasional window casting a soft glow. Every few seconds, Samir risked a glance in the mirror to see if she was all right. Finally, Madeline spoke again, her voice a fragile thread in the dark. I left the mansion in a hurry. After what happened, after they came for me, I just ran. She paused, as if the words themselves hurt. I didn't know where else to go. Her eyes glistened as she looked out at the passing gardens. Samir felt his heart tighten. Who came for you, Madeline? He asked gently. Was someone chasing you? He felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his voice calm. She did not answer at first. She stared at the window as though tracing the swirl of dust on the glass. After a moment, she let out a soft sigh. I don't know who they were. Men in black suits? They arrived at the party, my husband's memorial party. They said they were lawyers, but they didn't speak like lawyers. They demanded papers, keys, everything. Her voice cracked, and she blinked back tears. I was alone, just me and my grief. Samir nodded sympathetically. It must have been terrifying, he said. Did they hurt anyone? He watched her in the mirror, looking for a sign that she could relax. She shook her head. No, they only threatened. They said they would take everything if I didn't sign certain documents. They said I would lose my home, my money, even my name. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. Samir's chest tightened. He knew how it felt when someone threatened the security you had built with your own two hands. He felt a surge of protectiveness for this woman whose sorrow had become his burden. He drove on, turning onto a private lane lined with white picket fences and rose bushes. The scent of flowers drifted in through the open window, a faint reminder of spring. They reached a small white house with vine-covered walls and a porch swing illuminated by one lantern. Samir parked and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. He turned to Madeline in the mirror. "Here we are," he said softly. "Elm Street."
Ellen nodded.
Her eyes distant. She fumbled with the door handle and paused, her free hand resting on the seat. Samir leaned forward. "Do you need anything else?" he asked. "Someone to come get you?" A phone call? Sounded like an old friend offering a cup of tea. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I'll be all right. Thank you, Samir." She gave him a small, sad smile. He returned it gently and opened the door for her. She stepped out into the night, the lantern light casting a warm glow on her dark coat. She paused on the porch, turned to him, and mouthed one word. "Thank you." Samir nodded and watched her go inside. His heart still pounded from the story she had shared. He sat in the taxi for another moment, taking in the quiet house and the night air. Then he straightened up, started the engine, and drove off into the darkness, carrying with him the memory of a trembling widow and the weight of her whispered plea. Samir drove on through the night, the road winding like a ribbon beneath the taxi's wheels. Madeline sat quietly in the back seat, clutching the small black purse on her lap. The trees arched overhead, casting long shadows that flickered in the headlights. The city lights were far behind them now, and only the moon brightened the path ahead. Samir felt the hush of the world around them, as though the night itself were leaning close to hear Madeline's story. Glanced in the rearview mirror, and saw her shoulders tense and relax. Her coat was buttoned up to the neck, but a tendril of hair had escaped and curled against her cheek. He thought of his own daughter, and how she sometimes sat in the back seat chattering about school. He wondered what Madeline must feel now, riding alone in a strange car while her world had fallen apart. He slowed slightly at a curve, easing the taxi around a bend where the road climbed toward a hilltop view. "Do you want me to stop somewhere?" he asked softly. "A cafe, maybe? Or a place to rest?" She shook her head, her voice barely more than a whisper.
"I'll wait."
To keep moving. Her tone was steady, but Samir could hear the tremor under her words. "I can't go back to that house." He nodded, understanding that she meant the mansion where her husband had just been laid to rest. He pictured the grand stone walls, the iron gates and the echoing halls where wealth and grief had mingled. He felt his heart ache for her. "Tell me as much as you want," he said gently. "I'm here to listen." For a long moment she said nothing. The taxi rattled softly on the uneven road. Then she leaned forward and lifted her hand from her purse, and in her palm lay a small white envelope, sealed and unmarked. Samir saw how carefully she held it, as if it contained something too precious, or too terrible to drop. "Here," she said, her voice soft and urgent. "I don't know if I should trust anyone, but I trust you." Her eyes met his in the mirror, glimmering in the dim light. "Please keep this safe. Open it later if you help me." He reached forward and took the envelope, tucking it into the pocket of his coat. "I will," he promised. "No matter what happens, I'll keep it safe." She gave a small nod, then sank back into her seat. The taxi moved on, rising to the crest of the hill. Samir stopped at the top and turned off the headlights for a moment. The city sprawled below them, a carpet of lights in the valley. The air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers, carried up by a gentle breeze. Madeline watched the view through teary eyes. "That was my home," she said quietly, nodding toward the distant lights. "I thought it would be my sanctuary." "Never imagined." Her voice broke and she swallowed hard. "I never imagined they would come for me so soon." Samir watched her in the mirror, his hands still on the wheel. He felt a surge of protectiveness. "Who came for you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. "What did they want?" Madeline took a deep breath and rubbed her palms together. They said they were lawyers. They spoke at my husband's memorial party. They looked important, dark suits, polished shoes, but their eyes were cold. She paused, remembering. They said they had documents I needed to sign. Papers transferring everything, money, property, rights to someone else. They said if I did not sign by midnight, I would lose it all. She glanced at him, her eyes shiny. They left when I refused. They threatened to send more people. If I did not comply, she pressed her hand to her chest as though her heart still raced. I was so shocked. I couldn't think. Samir kept the taxi steady. He wanted to offer words of comfort, but worried they might sound hollow. Instead, he said, "You did the right thing. You are safe with me." Madeline gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. But I don't know where safe is. I can't go home. I can't go to the police, not yet. I'm afraid they have too many friends." Samir's heart clenched. "We'll figure something out," he said quietly. "You don't have to face this alone." She looked at him again, and for the first time he saw a spark of hope in her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "My husband. He handled everything. I was always protected by his wealth and status. Now that he's gone, I feel naked." She paused, staring out the window at the dark shapes of trees rushing past. "I miss him so much," she said, her voice soft. "He was my rock." Samir's throat tightened. He remembered the day his own father had died and how lost he felt without that steady presence. He cleared his throat and said, "Let me help you. I'll drive you as far as you need to go. You can find a safe place, even if it's just a guest house or a friend's home." Madeline let out a shaky breath. "I have a friend in the next town," she said, "but I don't know if it's safe to call her. Everything could be watched." She looked at him in the mirror. "But if I can get there, maybe I can figure out my next steps." Samir nodded. "Give me the address," he said. She picked up a small card from her purse and handed it to him through the front seat. He read the name of a modest inn on the edge of a neighboring town. The road felt longer now, lined with soft hills and more open fields. The taxi's headlights carved a path through darkness, leading them away from the Harper mansion and toward a place of simple safety. As they drove, Samir thought about the envelope tucked in his coat. He did not know what it contained, but he sensed it held the key to everything. He wondered if it was a letter from her husband, or perhaps some proof of her rights to his estate. He knew he must guard it carefully until it was safe to open. Madeline cleared her throat. "Thank you for listening," she said. "I know I've dumped this on you, a stranger." Samir smiled in the mirror. "You're not a stranger anymore," he replied. "I feel like I've known you a little since tonight." She glanced at him, then looked out at the rolling fields. "You've been so kind," she said. "I wish I could repay you now." He shook his head. "Don't worry about that," he said. "Your safety is all the reward I need." They passed a quaint farmhouse with a lone porch light. The air smelled of fresh hay and wood smoke. Madeline closed her eyes and leaned back, as though letting the night calm her. Samir felt a gentle relief wash over him. He had always liked driving passengers at night. It was quiet. It felt honest. Tonight it felt like more than that. Felt important. After another half hour, they saw the sign for Green Meadows Inn, a small building with warm lights, set back from the road under tall pines. Samir parked under an old lamppost that cast a yellow glow over the taxi. Madeline looked out the window. "This is it," she said softly. "Thank you." He cut the engine and reached into his coat to feel the envelope. It was still there, safe and sealed. He handed it gently back to her. "Keep this close," he said. "Remember, you're not alone in this." She took it with a nod. Her fingers closed around the paper as if she feared it might vanish. She opened the door and stepped onto the gravel drive. The lamppost light framed her in a soft halo. She turned and gave him a sad, brave smile. "Good night, Samir," she said. He nodded. "Good night, Madeline. Hope you find peace here." She walked toward the inn's entrance, disappearing into the warm light. Samir watched until the door closed behind her. Then he sat a moment in the silent taxi, the earth breathing around him. He thought of the envelope, of her story, and of the dawn that would come soon. Started the engine and drove back onto the road. carrying with him the weight of her trust and the hope that he could help her find safety. Samir pulled the taxi under the soft glow of the cafe's neon sign. Inside, the windows steamed from the warmth, and a few late-night customers sat hunched over cups of tea and slices of pie. The bell above the door jingled as Samir opened it and stepped inside. He held the door open for Madeline, and she slipped through with a cautious glance over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to be waiting. They chose a small booth in the corner where the light was gentle and the hum of conversation low. The table's wooden surface was worn smooth from years of use. Samir parked the taxi out front, then returned to sit across from Madeline. Eyes were still red, but she gave him a small nod of thanks. He smiled and reached for the menu. "Would you like some tea?" he asked softly. Madeline looked at the menu, then at him. "Yes, please," she said. "Black tea, if you have it." He ordered 2 cups of black tea and a plate of biscuits to share. The waitress, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, poured the steaming tea and set the biscuits between them. The scent of warm bread and floral tea leaves drifted over the table. Samir watched as Madeline wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. For a few minutes, they sat quietly, sipping tea. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping softly on the windows. Inside the cafe, the gentle clink of spoons and soft voices made the room feel safe. Madeline closed her eyes and exhaled a shaky breath. "This is the first time I've felt calm tonight," she said. Her voice was low, but she sounded more herself than she had since he picked her up. Samir nodded. "You've been through so much." He paused, choosing his words. "Do you want to talk more about what happened?" She picked up a biscuit and nibbled the edge, her hand still trembling slightly. After a moment, she laid the biscuit down and spoke. "When they came to the mansion, I was in the middle of saying goodbye to my husband's guests. It was supposed to be a quiet gathering after his funeral service. But then they walked in like they owned the place." Her eyes grew distant as she remembered. "They claimed to have new paperwork documents that said he had changed his will just days before he died. They said every penny would go to some unknown foundation unless I signed. They said I was no longer the sole heir." Samir leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Did you see the papers?" She shook her head. "No, they wouldn't show me. They just pushed me toward a desk and told me to sign. I refused. I refused again and again. Then they started raising their voices. They said they would come back with a court order if I didn't cooperate." She took a slow sip of tea, her lips closing firmly around the rim of the cup. "I don't know who they were working for. I don't know what they want. But I know they want everything I have." Samir dropped his voice, as if afraid the wrong person might overhear. "Do you think it's someone inside the family? Or a business rival? Or someone else entirely?" Madeline shook her head, her eyes wet again. "I don't know. My husband kept his work separate from our personal life. He was in finance, but I never knew the details. I trusted him. Now I feel so alone." She rubbed her temple with one hand and stared down at the table. The cafe's walls were painted in soft pastel colors, and a small vase of daisies sat. On each table, through the window, the rain painted the world in silver lines. Inside, they were a small island of safety. Samir reached out and touched her hand lightly. She looked up, surprised, and he gave her a gentle smile. "You're not alone tonight," he said. "And if you need help, I'll do what I can." She nodded, brushing away a tear. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you driving me away from that house." He shook his head. "We're brave to walk away, and we just need to figure out your next step." She closed her eyes and rested her forehead on her free hand. "I have nowhere to go. My home is not safe. I can't stay with friends because I don't know who I can trust. I feel like I'm in a fog." Samir nodded. "Let's try to clear it a bit. You have that friend in the next town, right?" Madeline opened her eyes. "Yes, but I didn't call her. I was afraid they would track my phone. I don't know how much time I have." He thought for a moment, then leaned in. "You could go to her place. Turn off the meter and drive with all the lights off if that helps. If you can turn your phone off or use a different line." She bit her lip. "Maybe. I'll have to see if I can trust her." She paused, breathing in deep. Don't know if anyone else knows where I am right now. He nodded. Okay. If you decide to go, I'll take you. But first, let's finish our tea and plan. They sipped in silence for a minute. The waitress refilled their cups without asking. The rain outside grew heavier, but inside the cafe, the warmth felt like a shield. Madeline set her cup down and rubbed her hands together. The envelope you're keeping safe, that has my husband's signature on a new will, she said softly. He did sign something just a few weeks ago. He wanted to add a clause that if anything happened to him, he wanted to make sure our money went to people who needed it most. Charities, hospitals, schools. Samir swallowed. So they want to stop that from happening. She nodded. Someone didn't want that will to be valid. They want the old will, the one that left everything to me, declared invalid. Or maybe they want no will at all, so the courts can decide. She leaned back, exhaustion on her face. I just want to honor his wishes. But I'm so confused. I'm not a lawyer. I never paid attention to the paperwork. Samir reached for a napkin and dabbed at a bead of water on the table. We can find someone trustworthy, a lawyer who works at night. There must be a 24-hour legal service in this town. Madeline's eyes widened. A lawyer? At this hour, he nodded. Yes, some towns have emergency legal help. It could cost a lot, but you have the means. And they could at least tell us what to do next. She looked at him, hope shining through her tears. Do you really think so? He gave her a firm nod. Yes, and if that doesn't work, we'll find another way. She closed her eyes and let out a breath. When she opened them again, her face looked steadier. Okay, she said. Do it. Samir smiled and reached for his wallet. He counted out enough money for their tea, the biscuits, and a small tip. He handed it to the waitress with a quiet thank you, and then turned back to Madeline. She stood and placed a hand on his arm. Thank you, Samir, she said, for everything. He shook his head. I'm just doing what I can, he replied. Now let's get you help. Outside, the rain had slowed. The street glistened under the cafe lights. Samir opened the door and offered his hand. Madeline took it and helped him push through the door into the damp night. The taxi's headlights cut through the mist as Samir drove forward, determined to help her find someone who could fight for her rights and honor her husband's wishes. They left the cafe behind, their reflections fading in the wet pavement as they moved toward a new plan, a new hope, and a promise that they would face this challenge together. The rain had stopped by the time Samir and Madeline stepped out of the cafe. The night air was cool and smelled of wet earth. Puddles shimmered under the street lamps like small mirrors, and everything felt quiet as if the whole town had gone to sleep while they were inside making plans. Samir opened the taxi door for Madeline, and she slipped in without a word. She looked stronger now. Tired, yes, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Maybe it was hope. Samir got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and turned on the heater just a little. He didn't speak right away. He let the calm sit between them. The taxi rolled slowly through the quiet streets of the small town, passing closed shops with old wooden signs and sleepy houses with warm lights behind their curtains. Madeline looked out the window, then turned to him. Do you believe people come into our lives at the right time? She asked. Samir smiled gently. Yes, he said. Sometimes strangers bring more light than the people we've known. For years, she nodded, her eyes soft. You've been that light tonight. He didn't reply, but her words stayed with him. They turned onto a long road that led out of town. Madeline gave him quiet directions to a small and tucked away, behind a row of pine trees. It was a place she remembered visiting years ago with her husband, simple, private, and safe. As they reached the inn, Samir saw the old wooden sign hanging above the driveway. Pine Hollow in East, 1962. A small cottage-style building stood in the distance, its porch lights casting a golden glow on the gravel path. The night had fully settled by now, wrapping everything in a thick silence. Mir parked the car under a tree, turned off the engine, and looked at Madeline. Oh. Sure about this place? She nodded. Yes, I think I'll be okay here for a few days. It's just until I find a lawyer I can trust. He opened the door for her once again, and she stepped out slowly, her black purse hanging from her arm. As she walked to the front desk window, while Samir waited near the car, sleepy night manager came out and handed her a room key after checking a few details. She paid in cash and turned back toward Samir. "Room number 4, she said softly. "First floor, by the corner." Samir walked her to the door. She paused before going in and looked at him with eyes full of meaning. "Oh no." "How to thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't picked up that call tonight, I don't know where I'd be." He smiled kindly. "It was fate," he said. "Sometimes the road brings people together for a reason." She held out a small envelope, the same one she had handed him earlier, now back in his hand again. "Open it," she said. Samir hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "You helped me when I had nothing else to give. I want you to have what's inside. It's a gift. My husband would have wanted someone good to have it." He slowly opened the envelope and pulled out a folded piece of paper. First, he didn't understand what it was. It looked like a certificate. Then he saw the words, "Stock ownership, certificate," and below that, his name printed in clear letters. He blinked, confused. I don't understand." Madeline smiled, though her eyes were still heavy with sorrow. "My husband bought these shares a few months before he died. He was always kind to people who helped others. When I saw how you treated me not as a burden, but as a human being, I remembered the shares. I asked our family lawyer to prepare one for a situation like this. You were written in. You didn't just give me a ride, Samir. Gave me safety, kindness, and time." Samir stood in stunned silence. "This must be a mistake." She shook her head gently. "It's not. Keep it. Cash it in when the time feels right. It won't solve every problem, but it might change a few things for you." He looked down at the paper again, then at her. "This is worth a lot of money, Madeline." "I know," she said. "And I trust you to use it well." Samir didn't know what to say. He'd spent years working long shifts to feed his family, to send his daughter to school, to cover his son's medicine. And now, this gift from a stranger who had needed nothing more than a warm voice and a safe ride. He tucked the paper back into the envelope and held it carefully in both hands. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget this." They stood there for a moment, two people who had crossed paths by chance and were now forever part of each other's stories. Then she stepped toward the door. "If I need help again," she said, "can I call?" "You," Samir smiled. "Always. My number's in the taxi records. Just say the word." She nodded and opened the door to her room. A soft light spilled out as she stepped inside. She turned one last time, waved, and closed the door gently behind her. Samir stood there for a moment, the cool night breeze brushing his face. He felt a strange calm come over him. He looked up at the stars and breathed in deeply. The world didn't feel quite so cold anymore. Back in the taxi, he turned on the engine and started driving home. The roads were quiet, the streets almost glowing under the moon. He thought of his children, sleeping peacefully in their beds. He thought of his wife, who would be waiting up with warm food and a tired smile. And he thought of Madelantha, crying widow who had whispered please in the middle of the night and somehow left behind a miracle. Samir drove slowly, not in a hurry for once. His mind was filled with thoughts of fate, of kindness, of how one ride in the night had changed everything. When he reached home, the sky was already starting to lighten in the east. The first blush of dawn touched the edges of the rooftops. He parked the taxi, held the envelope close to his chest, and quietly walked inside. Aisha was still awake. She stood in the hallway, sleepy but smiling. "You're late," she said gently. He nodded and smiled back. "Yes," he said. "Oh, it was worth it." And as he sat down at the table, placing the envelope beside his teacup, he knew that life had changed, not because of money, but because of what it meant. That kindness still mattered, that trust could still exist, and that sometimes helping a stranger wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the beginning of something beautiful. That night, Samir didn't just drive a taxi, he drove a story that neither of them would ever forget.